Performance psychologist, over 30 years experience bringing out the best in people, Olympians, professional athletes, elite level teams. We're going to add a tennis angle, of course, into this tonight. And he's just launched his book recently, The Performance Mindset, The 7 Steps to Success in Sport and Life. The author, Anthony Klarica. Great to see you in, Anthony.
Thanks for having me.
There's so many things to pull apart here in a short amount of time that we've got, but I did notice there is a chapter or a couple of pages certainly on Rafael Nadal. I mean, you, like anyone who just follows sport, Anthony, just simply sits back and says what he has done is quite extraordinary. And he does get a mention in your book. Before I sort of go into telling what your book's all about, but Rafa, doing it again, what's the first thing that sort of springs to mind?
For sure. The first thing is it's total coincidence because I wrote the book late last year and I looked at his performance at the French Open with 13 slams, and I noted in the book that that's probably one of the single, and you mentioned it earlier, one of the single best sporting performances by an individual in any sport, probably across the globe.
Yep.
And I did a little bit of work into it and had a look at the total percentage of points.
I'd love to know. Let's pick it apart. Yeah,
it's incredible. So, with a bit of assistance from the great Darren McMurtry from Tennis Australia, I said to him, "Listen, this record by Nadal is pretty astonishing. This is even before this year, which we can talk about." And we went back and had a look at pretty much every single point played in every single match for the 13 slam wins. And it, totals 91 matches. And incredibly, the percentage of points that he wins is under 60. For such a dominant performance across the world, it's about 57. And I think it just speaks to his total resilience. And I put in a quote that he actually, in the book, from Rafa's own book, actually, where he actually notes that the whole sport is in the mind, and he's got a mantra: every single moment counts. And you can really see that these things are deliberate and planned. And I referenced Tony Nadal, his uncle, who coached him for quite a while. And actually was lucky enough a number of years ago at the Brisbane International to do a talk, Tony and myself. And on that day, of course, everyone was there to listen to Tony, and I got the chance to do that when we were co-presenting. But he went on court afterwards and spoke to the budding coaching audience at the time about how he used to coach Rafa just to hit through every ball, not worry about the point that's gone, not worry about the point that's ahead. And that's what he drilled into him day after day after day as a junior. And Rafa refers to that in his book as well. And you can actually see that he still plays like that. And I think that's what's enabled him to go on and get 14.
And I encourage anyone, when you go to the Australian Open next year, and I've been lucky enough to sort of go around the world and cover some tennis and just sit and watch Nadal train as well. It's fascinating, Anthony. I don't know, you've probably done it, I imagine, where he just simulates those match conditions. And he's sweating it up as much in the warm-up and practice as he is, going through a 3 or a 5-set match. I mean, his habits are just, to do it over such a long period of time, and resilience is the key word. I mean, you need it, particularly in an individual sport when it's you versus the bloke on the other side.
Totally. What Rafa does really well, and I have seen him training on court and been to a bunch of his matches. When he goes training, he's not training just his shots. He's actually training his focus. He's training his capacity to zero in. He's training his capacity to stay in the present, forget that last point. And he even talks about if he not to get caught up in the thought of winning. So he says if the thought of winning comes into his mind, he crushes it. That's his language. And it's all about staying in the present. You see that in the training court. So when he practices, he's practicing those mental skills too.
Absolutely. So how would you succinctly describe this book that you've written?
Good question. Look, succinctly, it features 17 different athletes from a wide range of sports. There's some tennis players in there, which I was really honoured to speak to. Scott Draper, Nicole, Pratt, Storm Sanders is in there a little. Taylor Harris, Sam Mitchell from AFL, which people in Melbourne love. A whole range of other sports. Bridget Muir, who climbed, the first Australian woman to climb Mount Everest. That's an amazing feat, and her story is incredible. So I feature a whole range of stories, and there's things in there like motivation, resilience, focus, I mentioned, culture, leadership. So their experiences and how they dealt with their journeys, it's a real great insight that they afforded me, which I can now share with the readers.
No doubt.
And some of my own experiences of working in sport across AFL, a bunch of clubs over 20 years, and in tennis as well, and motorsport, whole range of other things.
So whether you're a sports fan, a tennis fan tuning in to us tonight, you'll get something out of this book. We'll tap into the tennis angle because you have worked sort of closely with TA over the years. Can you just take us inside the roles that you've played within tennis?
Yeah, well, I think tennis is one of those sports that everyone understands really. The mental component we're just talking about, Rafa, is a really big aspect. And TA's supported that mental component across the years. I've been fortunate enough to work with some really good operators, coaches and other sports psych mindset professionals in tennis, and had the privilege of travelling around with quite a number of players in the TA role. So yeah, that's been something that I've had the luxury to do.
I mean, this is an area where more players seem to be really tapping into, Anthony. I mean, I'll probably look at Iga Swiatek as a great example, who rise in the last 3 years now to win 2 French Opens, dominant world number one. Tremendous girl to sit and listen to. There's a lot going on up there. She's busy, just in off the tennis court as she is on the court, and just the pace of life that she leads. But not only has she got obviously a coaching team, strength and conditioning, but she really tapped into that sports psych area. And she's not the only one to do that, but she's one that's been pretty open about how that sports psych has just helped shape her. And we heard the little grab coming on at the start of the show from her press conference about trying to be the one that's not as stressed as the other opponent or whoever she's going up against. I mean, she's a great example of someone that's tapped into above the shoulders.
Fantastic example, actually. And that interview was fascinating. I agree with you. She's also, another thing I took from the interview was how she's focused on really learning from experiences that she's already had. And that's something that she's used to minimise her stress so that she can translate into the competition arena what she actually does at training, which is a challenge for a lot of tennis players, to be honest.
So do you think it's when you talk about performance mindset, and you've dealt with individuals over the years and you've dealt with teams, does one need it more than the other? You know where I'm sort of coming from?
I do, yeah. It's look, there's an overlap because obviously every individual within a team uses their own mindset strategies, and they also have to think about how they operate within a team framework. So there's another complexity. I wouldn't say one's more or less important. They're very, very different. In an individual sport, if you lose, it's all on you.
Yep.
In a team sport, if you lose or if you don't perform well, the team could still win. You can sort of think I've done okay, but you still need to tap into the team psychology as well as your individual. That brings in a lot of complexities, how you get on with people, how you collaborate with others that you might be competing for a spot for in a team. They're big factors in the psychology of a team sport. In an individual sport, as I said, though, the spotlight is all on you.
It is. There's no hiding.
No hiding.
Particularly on a tennis court. Anthony, you talked about certainly some of the people you've spoken to in tennis. I know that Storm Sanders, who's obviously out on tour, Nicole Pratt, highly esteemed coach, former player, Scotty Draper, who's gone into the sort of admin area of TA, former player, of course. Just tell us some of the discussions you had with that trio who have all walked sort of some different generations of tennis in this country.
Yeah, well, some of the insights they gave me that we describe in the book, for example, Scotty Draper talks about his win at Queen's, and when he was leading, he talks about how out of the blue, he spoke about nerves. They can either come out of the blue or they can build up gradually, and he was leading in the last game of the third set to win, and he all of a sudden got quite nervous, and thankfully he sat down, and what he did was he thought of something on the spot and reversed the score. Instead of being 5-3 up, he thought, I'm 3-5 down. He always played like an underdog, and he took that approach, for example, when he also beat Muster, who was the number one, the king of clay, as Muster was known years ago. And he said he made that match, when he beat Muster as a highly credentialed player, he said he forgot about the score in that match, and he took it purely as a battle of wills, and he didn't worry about winning the score or the points. He worried about willpower and beating Muster in that because he took pride in that. And he took that approach into Queen's. And when he reversed the score and became the underdog again, he actually won that tournament.
Nice.
And Nicole Pratt talks about a range of things, including her challenges on the tour and how you don't get into flow that often. She says she could, over a 20-year career, could count on one hand how many times she actually got in the flow. It's mostly about working hard to stay switched on. That's what a lot of people don't realise. You've got to be constantly on top of your game. And even the challenges of being on the tour, it is a grind, living out of a suitcase and hotels. And her one and only win on the tour in India, she went back to her room at night and she actually cried.
Yeah.
And she says that the reason that happened was because she realised that tennis really can be lonely, and it's a sport where you should celebrate. And that taught her a lot of lessons that day.
I think that's a great point, because we just talked at the start of the show about, some of our Aussies, or a 17-year-old winning her first tournament, and then we get players who don't win their first tournament until they're in their 30s, who have been grinding maybe for 10, 15 years, and what the definition of success is in an individual sport like tennis. And I always find this quite challenging, Anthony, to pull apart when we've got to analyse our Australian contingent. Are they performing at a good level? Could they be performing better? And the hardest bit when you sit here is that you're not inside their life on tour. Are they doing everything to get the best out of themselves? And that's something that's really hard to answer from my point of view, because we just look at a match, we look at pure talent, but as we know, pure talent, and there's many examples of that, only takes you there. Unless you've got the work ethic and all the other bits to match that pure talent, you're probably not going to get the best out of yourself.
Well, the whole theme about the book is that mindset underlies work ethic, and that becomes more important than talent. So it's mindset first, in my opinion, then work rate, then talent. And there's so many variables on the tennis tour, and you could go for years without winning a tournament, and it's incredible. You have to genuinely be resilient, be able to absorb the losses and the knocks. Living out of a suitcase week after week, you lose first round, you don't know where you're going. Your schedule depends if you win.
Yep.
If you win 3 matches in a row, you stay at the hotel. You're only breaking even. Some players only start breaking even with their expenses inside the top 120. So if you're up 180 in the world, it sounds brilliant. And in all honesty, it is amazing. It's very few people that can get there, but it's still tough.
Yeah, dollars-wise, it doesn't necessarily translate, as you're right, until you get closer to that top 100. Storm, quick one on Stormy, is the current player.
Storm, brilliant, making a transition back after years of injury. Her perseverance, I think, is one of the things that comes through in the book. And you've mentioned a few injuries of players that you've already discussed today on the show. Yeah, dealing with injuries is a real tough battle, and I think moving back into doubles and transitioning back there and finding her way on the tour in singles a little bit more is something that she'll work towards. But she talks about routines and the importance of well-being. You do need to look after yourself on the tour, because if you can't sustain your well-being, it will get you.
No doubt. Now, one thing we were talking about before we came on air was some of the research that you've done into Junior Grand Slam Finalists. It's over, about a decade period, and how that's translated into a career best ranking. I know you got some numbers that would be sort of interesting for the people to hear.
Fascinating. Look, I looked into this data, obviously knowing a little bit about the tour and seeing some players and how challenging it can be. And we need to be more understanding of that. It's not just tennis, but transition in any sport from junior to open level is one of the big demands and challenges. We talk about all the reasons why transition is so difficult. So I thought, let's go back and have a look at every Junior Grand Slam finalist, not just the winner, but the winner and the runner-up over a 10-year period from 2001 to 2010. And I looked at all the 4 slams, boys and girls. And fascinatingly, the average best career ranking on the Open Tour from Junior Slam finalists in the boys was not even in the top 100.
Right.
It's 125.
Okay.
It just goes to show, I think, how challenging it can be to move from a junior. And let's remember, in tennis, juniors are up to 20 years of age. And I understand not all players play juniors, but there's some very, very good players ranked who ranked number 1 eventually that won Junior Slam. So they sway the data, towards the lower end. So that just gives you an indication of how many players struggled to really make big roads on the Open Tour as they transitioned from that junior sphere.
Give us a couple of names, just out of curiosity.
Couple of names. Who do you want? Well, Monfils was 6, so he obviously went on. Cilic was 3.
Yep.
They both won the French Open in 04 and 05 respectively. But then you get a guy, Daniel Berger, won the French Open in 09, career best ranking 637.
Yeah.
It's tough. We all remember the names that go well, but you don't remember or ever hear the names that struggle along the way.
Now, the sort of the reverse of that, because I look at the junior rankings a lot, and it's easy for people to throw out there, well, Australia hasn't got that many, good juniors coming through at the moment, or highly ranked. Now, it doesn't. I mean, you don't need to be the best junior necessarily to have a great pro career, do you? I mean, the stats the other way will say that it's sort of irrelevant. You're developing, you're trying to build a game that can play on the pro tour and have some longevity. But if you don't get maybe even inside the top 50, top 100, it's not the end of the world.
No, it's not the end of the world, but you certainly need to focus on building that mindset, and you need to make sure that you've got the commitment to work through that transition phase. Because as you spoke about earlier, you can go through a lot of time of losing consecutive matches, and you're travelling, and you ask yourself whether it's worth it or not. And as I said before, this is not just tennis. You know, you could look at the Australian cricket team, the men's or women's soccer team. It happens in AFL, AFLW. It's all sports. That transition is a really challenging time, and I really like to advocate for clubs, coaches, and the junior athletes themselves to focus on their mindset development to assist them through that transition phase. It's a big deal.
No doubt. Thank you for coming in. There's so much more we could probably speak about, but that's a little teaser for the book. Now, where can we go and grab a copy? The Performance Mindset.
All good bookshops and online. Thanks very much.